At the end of March every year, the town of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan is on watch. The Soo Locks, which connect Lake Superior and Lake Huron, are operating once again, officially starting the Great Lakes shipping year. The Lee A. Tregurtha has picked up a load of iron ore pellets in Marquette, Michigan. It is now set to make its first trip of the year through the locks. The Lee A has served the Great Lakes under a number of names since 1961, but its history goes even further back than that. The vessel originally served as an oil tanker in World War II, going on a multitude of convoys throughout Western Europe and Northern Africa. In 2024, the ship will be over 80 years old. Old age is a commonality on the Great Lakes. The freshwater of the lakes allow the freighters to last much longer than ships that sail in saltwater. The Mark W. Barker is the newest freighter on the Great Lakes. Built in 2022, the construction of the boat broke a trend that extended over multiple decades. Its nearest predecessor is not one, not two, not three, but 4 decades older. These ships are not this old because it's convenient. Instead, there is a 100-year law that makes shipbuilding in the U.S. next to impossible. The Lee A. Tregurtha has just finished its first trip of the season, carrying cargo from Marquette to Detroit. The Lee A is able to do what most boats cannot: load cargo from one American port and unload it at another American port. This is governed by the Marine Merchant Act of 1920, more commonly referred to as the Jones Act. The Jones Act states that all goods transported between U.S. ports be carried on ships that have been constructed in the U.S., fly the flag, owned by U.S. citizens, and are crewed by U.S. citizens. This is known as a cabotage law. Cabotage laws have a number of protections that allow domestic shipping to thrive, whether that be from creating jobs for the local economy, national security, or setting environmental standards. Most countries have them, and for good reason. Most boats on the Great Lakes are American or Canadian flagged. The cabotage laws and proximity of these two nations allow these boats to dominate the region. There are also those ships that make the trip overseas. The Maxima is a ship flagged with the Netherlands. How do their laws compare? Compared to the US, the Netherlands' set of laws prioritizes freedom of movement and is far less restrictive. Ships here are allowed to be built overseas, and as long as they comply within the regulations, can fly the Dutch flag. This brings competition, and Dutch companies can choose to build their ships 20 to 40% cheaper overseas rather than domestically. Now, this isn't a perfect circumstance. Only 4% of ships are built domestically, resulting in a fleet of ships that can be dangerous to national security. But the Dutch shipbuilding industry isn't dead. As part of a new initiative, the government is looking to reduce construction costs by 10 to 15%. The companies would have advantage of Dutch sustainability, reliability, and technology. Shipbuilding in the Netherlands has competition. The boats are able to innovate cheaper, and with EU vessels being given the freedom of movement between locations, the ports operate efficiently. The United States doesn't focus on competition. There are only a few companies that are able to fly the US flag. This helps with national security, but has its pitfalls with the volume and efficiency of the ships. The Jones Act fleet has dropped from 250 ships in the 1980s to just 91 today. The number of ships that can legally carry goods between American ports is tiny. In total, only 2% of domestic freight travels by sea. Comparing this to Europe, it makes up over 40% of freight. It is clear there is something wrong. The American shipping industry has gotten smaller, while the rest of the world has become global. America remains in the past. This isn't to say that the Jones Act is completely broken, or that it's solely responsible for the faults of the industry. But is there no other alternative? Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory that has repeatedly been exploited by the Jones Act. Because the island is dependent on receiving goods through containers from American ships, everything is more expensive. According to a 2012 report by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, it found that shipping a 20-foot container on a Jones Act voyage had an estimated cost of $3,063. This is compared to just $1,504 to the nearby Dominican Republic, a 60% price differential. By taking account of total maritime transportation costs, it was then calculated that the Jones Act has a 7.2% tax on Puerto Rico. This has a major ripple effect that is hard to calculate, but it is estimated that 13,000 fewer jobs exist. This has caused $337 million to be lost among residents, a total disappearance of $1.5 billion in economic activity. On an island where employment is already sparse, the Jones Act has cost the territory greatly. This is the reality of shipping in the US. Whether you live in Puerto Rico, the Great Lakes, the coast, or further inland, domestic maritime shipping is an industry that needs to have more prominence. If you're in an isolated part of the nation, you are forced to pay an unreasonable price tag. The Great Lakes are plagued by old age, with boats that are unable to adapt to modern times. And just about anywhere else in the country, bottlenecks. This is a cumulative impact caused by a number of things, but the lack of transportation options is certainly a factor. When it comes to efficiency, nothing is more efficient than water. It may not arrive faster than other modes of transportation, but the sheer volume of cargo that can be carried on water completely offsets this to make it hyper efficient. If domestic shipping in the US is to reach its full potential, containers need to make a bigger mark. The Port of Illinois, located just south of Chicago, has direct connections to 6 of the 7 largest rail networks in America. Half of America's container trains come through Chicago. It serves as a major asset for the city and the United States as a whole. But there's a bottleneck, and it's one of the largest in the country. This is because the rail yards at Port of Illinois are in different eras. Despite the railway connections, the port doesn't have the infrastructure to load containers directly onto boats, and boats cannot load directly onto freight trains. With this major inefficiency, the port sits there, underutilized. Containers have the ability to transport high-value products like pharmaceuticals or heavy machinery. With loose bulk cargo on the decline, there is a significant interest to diversify the cargo of these ports. The investment is also there. The Biden administration has set aside $17 billion to improve maritime infrastructure. The Port of Cleveland, Duluth, and Detroit have also all made an effort to support containerized shipping. With all these infrastructure improvements, however, how much of an impact will it really make? At the end of the day, US domestic shipping has too many limitations and so much untapped potential. Lobbyists have long defended the Jones Act, and although the 100-year law has some important protections, it has become an overregulated, bureaucratic law that works against the shipping industry. This overregulation caused by the Jones Act is simply the reality of US shipping. The Jones Act fleet, which once boasted hundreds of ships, has dwindled to just double digits. When looking at American shipping, you're looking at the past. The industry's inability to adapt to modern demand has caused trains and trucks to become overloaded with cargo, while the most efficient means of transportation remains idle. If the US is looking to diversify its transportation, lift bottlenecks, traffic, and even reduce its impact on the climate, inland shipping is available. It just needs attention and care.